Thank you, panel. With that, we're going to close public testimony and leave the bill pending. Chair lays out Senate Bill 388 by Vice Chair King, and you recognize, sir, on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that we passed out in almost the same form last session out of the Senate. It did not progress in the House. A little bit of history. So back in 1999, during electricity deregulation, the legislature also put into statute that we wanted 50% of our system-wide ERCOT generation capacity to be made up of natural gas. And when we put this into statute, we excluded renewables since they were in their infancy. We only had around 300 megawatts of renewable energy installed at that time. After the natural gas goals were put into law, the Public Utility Commission built out rules around this, creating a credit trading program that would be implemented if we ever fell below that 50% threshold. That credit program has never been triggered because we've always met our natural gas goals because we were excluding renewables. In other words, renewables don't go into the count against the 50%. So what does 388 do? SB 388 will update this statute and change our natural gas goals to a 50% dispatchable goal for new generation, making it technology agnostic. We will also now include renewables when determining if the new generation system-wide meets this 50% goal. 2026 will be the first year of the snapshot, and this will help us in the legislature know if the implementation of this is going well and if any additional updates are necessary. So how do the mechanics work? Reminder, this program is expected to work the same as the current rules already set out by the PUC. The Commission will likely need to make some updates to the rules around the program if the goals are not met. Let me kind of walk you through this so everybody kind of understands how it works. So as far as the PUC, for step one, they'll evaluate the system-wide new capacity after 2026. So on January 1st of 2027, the PUC will look back at the new generation built during 2026 and see if it's 50% dispatchable. If the answer is yes, no further actions taken. Step two, if the goal of 50% is not met, the shortfall will be defined. And what is that delta? They'll determine what is that delta of megawatts to create equilibrium of 50% dispatchable. For example, if 5,000 megawatts were built, 2,500 megawatts for that year would need to have been dispatchable. And how many megawatts we're short to meet that number will be settled by trading credits. So next step, they would allocate the credits and/or compliance payment. Again, this is already in their rules today. At this point, when you go to allocation, you will look at company by company of the new generation built in that year, this being 2026 first, and see if they are within 50% dispatchable. If they're not, they'll show the PUC. You will show the PUC the credits you bought to make up the difference, or you will have to go buy credits. If credits are not available, you will have to make an alternative compliance payment. So let me kind of give a quick example how that would work. So let's take generator number one. Let's say they built 1,000 megawatts in 2026 and it's all dispatchable. They will now have 500 credits that they can sell to someone who did not meet that goal. In another situation, if generator 2 put in 500 megawatts of solar, for example, as renewable, then they're going to have to purchase 500 credits from someone with dispatchable credits that has those to sell. Again, all of these are current rules today. None of this is new that we created. It just never been triggered because we've never fallen below the 50-cent natural gas goal because we've never counted renewables in the assessment. Also, just for your information, although this bill is prospective and only looking at new generation, our entire system-wide fleet is over 50% today. Today, we're about 60% dispatchable and 38% non-dispatchable. So then you would say, why do we need the rule? Because this number doesn't reflect what is in the queue. And what is in the queue today is heavy on the side of renewable and lacking in dispatchable. So that's why we need to go ahead and make this credit program work. Benefits to changing. Changing will To a 50% dispatchable goal will have a number of advantages. Most importantly, more dispatchable generation will be built within ERCOT. Senate Bill 388 incentivizes dispatchable generation to be built by giving an opportunity for that type of generation to sell credits to others. It creates another available revenue stream that benefits dispatchable generation. And again, what do you always hear from dispatchable generation? That there's not enough strong price signals out there to justify it. It will also encourage renewable generation to firm by adding in dispatchable energy like batteries or other things to make sure they stay 50% dispatchable and aren't required to buy credits. And SB 388 also helps counteract distortions by federal and state subsidies that have resulted and are resulting in a overbuild of intermittent generation. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Members, questions of Senator King? Right. Chair, Senator Colquist.
So you're saying batteries are dispatchable?
Well, one thing we've been talking about for a committee substitute is, yes, batteries are generally considered dispatchable. The difference is, and why the credit system probably needs to be adjusted to reflect this, they aren't available 24/7 like a gas-fired plant or a coal-fired plant would be, or nuclear. And so it's been suggested that in the committee substitute, we adjust how much credit batteries receive based on the amount of hours in a given period that they can provide electricity. In other words, downgrade their credit value.
Agree. Because
I thought you might.
they are not 100% dispatchable.
Right. They're 100% for the 2 or 3 hours they
2
run.
or 3 hours, and depending on where they gather that electricity from.
And then it's gone, and they would recharge either from whatever their recharging source is.
Do you, and I'm sorry, well, look, do you specify where they are charging from, or they can just go out underneath the power line and?
Bill doesn't contemplate that. They all have their own power purchase arrangements, power purchase agreements, and they can charge. Some of them may be charging off renewables, some of them may be charging off dispatchable, or they may just be taking it off the grid where it comes from that day, buying it late at night when the electricity's cheap.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Johnson.
Is 50% the right number, or should it be 52 or 48 or 55 or 45?
I don't know. The reason I went with 50% because that's what's been in statute since 1999.
So we're going off the wisdom of a legislature. That's skeptical point number one. In 1999, based on a grid that didn't exist today, and keeping that number?
Well, I think part of the assessment process we'll see going forward, and one of the reasons we didn't want this to actually go into effect until January 1st of 2027 for the credits, is that'll give us the 2026 year to see and how this really played out, what's in the queue and what there is, and then the legislature can come back and we can adjust that goal. For a long time we had renewable energy goals in Texas. In 1999, when SB7 passed, there was a 10% renewable energy goal, and they passed that almost before the legislation was finished, and then it was up to, I forget, 20% or something like that. And then those credits stayed in place until they're actually just phasing out now those renewable energy credits, the state ones, the RECs. And at the same time, the 50% for dispatchable was put in place. Whether that's the perfect number or not, I don't know. But we'll be able to take a really good look at that as the PUC puts this into place and as we see what credits were made available by it, and we'll measure it by the queue. And frankly, you may want to come back and change it periodically. If we're still seeing a real shortage in dispatchable, then you may want to up that to where those credits more incentivize dispatchable. If you see the opposite, you could actually go in the opposite direction. But 50% was just...
These credits are nothing like the PCM, I guess.
No.
Okay.
No.
And I guess what I'm suggesting here is that we spend a lot of time talking about markets, trying to construct markets, and I do appreciate your historical perspective, and I recognize that you have a greater historical perspective on it than I have. But I think these...
Which just means I could be historically wrong.
It could be. It could be. Let's look at the numbers that you talked about. If 5,000 new megawatts are built, and 1,000 of it, let's say somebody builds a 1,000 megawatt wind farm. The credit system, they would then be required to purchase credits that are the equivalent of 1,000 megawatts of dispatchable generation.
500, so that they're at the 50%.
But they built 1,000, and if they buy 500, we're going to be 1,500, and they'll be 66%, won't they?
Okay, so let me think through that. So if they build 1,000 megawatts of solar,
Yeah.
then they were not at their 50% goal, so they would have to go purchase 500 dispatchable credits from someone that had those to sell.
Or is it the overall total? In order, they have to purchase enough credits to offset the amount that they added that throws it. I mean, I'm getting lost on the math, but it's also.
I think what we're doing, I think what you're really going to see happen is, I think you're going to see this serve as an offset to the federal credits and help level the playing field between dispatchable and intermittent. But I also think you're going to see the renewables go out and work deals with dispatchable. I think you're going to say, hey, I'm going to build 1,000 solar this year. Rather than have to buy credits, I'm going to go ahead and work a deal with someone who's going to build 1,000 dispatchable, and then we're going to be awash.
So that brings me to the next question. If they build 1,000 intermittent generators and they now need to meet these credits, do they need to buy 1,000 megawatts of batteries? Will that count as the right purchase, or 50?
Well, they would be, if all they built was 1,000 of renewable, they would need to acquire 500 credits. And
Could that be through 500 megawatts of batteries?
We do have ERCOT and Vice President of Commercial Operations, as well as someone from the PUC as resource witnesses. We want to bring them up for further discussion about how credit mechanisms work in the market.
And currently it would be under the bill, but I think we need to adjust downward the credit for batteries because they can't run 24/7.
So they'd have to get more than the
They could,
formulaic number. But what about the fact that the renewable itself, when we're looking at the overall peak demand, we usually look at net peak demand because we presume the renewables are not producing at faceplate capacity, and yet we're going to require them to buy credits to offset their faceplate capacity. Isn't that inconsistent?
Their nameplate capacity. Yeah.
Nameplate, yes. Thank you.
I think if the goal is to incentivize dispatchable, then I think this works toward that goal.
I understand, and Mr. Chairman, I'll yield to this, but my concern is that this is already a very complex market. We've already taken steps to incentivize dispatchable generation. We have the DRRS, we have the much maligned PCM, we have the TEF and other acronyms that were designed to do this, as well as the various mechanisms that ERCOT can deploy. This is yet another one. Are we messing with the market too much? Won't the free market, to the extent it's a free market, take care of this?
I don't think it, and I think that's the issue. I don't think it's really a free market right now because you always get more of what you subsidize and less of what you tax, and that's why we've got so many renewables in the queue and so many constructed over the last 25 years is because you've got that large federal subsidy. What this is trying to do is trying to level the playing field by creating an incentive to offset those federal subsidies and incentivize more dispatchable being built, which is what we really need for reliability and pricing.
And I guess we'll have some witnesses talk about whether or not that's in fact what we need and whether or not the
Thank you for those questions, though.
proliferation of
Thank you,
renewables is
Senators.
a problem.
Keith, you're with ERCOT, and you're the Vice President of Commercial Operations, and then Werner, you're the economist. What's that? Barksdale. Yes, I'm sorry. You're with PUC, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can this dispatchable credit legislation or law has been on the books for a long time, never actually been implemented, correct?
Yes, sir.
And is it possible we have significant incentives at the federal level through the Inflation Reduction Act, and those are not going away, the production tax credits? And so is it possible from your learned positions to put in place a counterbalance that firms weather-dependent resources through the utilization of dispatchable credits? Who wants to talk about that?
Chairman, thanks for the question. I'm Barksdale English with the Public Utility Commission testifying on the bill. Good morning, Vice Chair. Yes, it's possible to establish a credit trading program for dispatchable generation. And I think part of the question and answer between Senator Johnson and Vice Chair King might be elucidated by talking about the fact that the credit trading program would take an historical perspective on what was built in the previous year and apply those requirements to the prompt year so that we're not getting into a math problem of is it 50% or 66%. We're seeing what was built last year and then requiring folks to catch up on the 50% dispatchable generation requirement through current year credit obligations. Hopefully that
It's
makes
another
sense.
mechanism to firm up weather-dependent intermittent resources.
It would certainly provide for
Affirming
incentives.
requirements through dispatchable credits.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Do you have further input on that?
Yep. Mr. Chairman, Senators, my name is Keith Collins, Vice President, Commercial Operations with ERCOT. Our view is that dispatchable generation is needed on our grid. They provide for reliability on the system, particularly during periods of stress. We saw that last summer. We saw that a few weeks ago. I will note that, as Senator Johnson noted, there are programs under development. DRS is an example that we're working on to incentivize dispatchable resources. There is also HB 1500. There was a firming requirement laid out on that as well. And so there is some potential for overlap between Senate Bill 388 and some of these other programs. There are details that would need to be worked out through the commission to ensure that that overlap would be contained. But again, we do appreciate the need for more dispatchable resources as they do provide for reliability.
And ERCOT was in charge of the renewable credits? I don't know. Advise me of how renewable credits worked when they were around before we got rid of them.
That is correct. We do operate the program today on renewable energy credits. It is similar to what was described earlier in terms of to the extent that credits are created, they are ultimately to the extent that there needs to be trading, there's trading of those credits and then retirement of those
And
credits.
the clearing is through ERCOT, those credits?
No, that we account for those credits. We don't necessarily.
They're traded by independent third parties,
Correct.
third party to third party, not on the clearing.
That's correct.
If I wanted a renewable credit, could I go get one somewhere?
They are available. Yes.
Interesting how that works. So dispatchable credits are not some, crazy idea. I mean, we had renewable credits out there in the sense of it being traded for how long have they been around? And we tried to incent renewables. That was the purpose of them, correct?
Yes.
1999. And we thought that was a resource necessary for state subsidies and state support. But now we have the opposite issue with the need for dispatchable generation and the ability to either change our market structure or put in ancillary services. Our credits are not so far-fetched that they're not potentially a reasonable pathway to explore. Would be my thought on that. Am I thinking wrong? I mean,
They are. There are potential options and pathways to have successful incentives. There are some potential concerns that we would have on some negative incentives.
such as what? Tell me about
For
that.
instance, with withholding. We even see this with renewable energy credits, where you're playing a game in terms of I'm going to withhold how much I build this year so I can take advantage of potentially higher prices next year. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that needs to be at least recognized, that you may delay build in order to take advantage of potential greater value. In
Dispatchable resources generation could be withheld from actually being produced or made secondary to the thought that those credits could be worth more the following year.
Correct.
You have any input on that?
I think, Chairman, we would want to make sure that we're involving the independent market monitor in the design of the program to ensure that we've got good safeguards in place to prevent malfeasance in that nature. I think the renewable energy credits are probably, since they're going to be valued every single year starting in 2026, the likelihood, in my perspective, of withholding is smaller, because if it's not good this year, they'll be around next year and the following year and the following year, and so there might be other market signals that the generation companies would be looking for to determine whether or not they want to make the investment.
Okay. Senator Johnson had his slide on. Anyone? Go ahead.
First, I wanted to say that for the past several years, this committee and this building has been emphasizing the importance of dispatchable generation, and I have always supported it. I continue to support it. That is distinct from saying we need to mess with the market further and set some baselines and predefine the market. So I want to ask both of you, if tomorrow morning we woke up and there were 200 gigawatts of new renewable energy on the grid, is the grid less reliable? Tomorrow morning it's there.
There is a limit to the amount of renewables.
I never do this except right now. Please start with a yes or no and then explain it. Is the grid less reliable tomorrow morning if we have 200 gigawatts of interconnected, intermittent renewable energy? And if it's unfair, hedge if you have to, but I'd prefer you start with a yes or no. I don't want to be a jerk, but I feel like it's a yes or no question.
I would love it to be a yes or no question. The volume is the problem, right? At 200, that would be a problem.
How
so the answer
so?
would be no. And part of that is renewables are the cheapest resource in the stack.
Yeah.
And so you would end up dispatching those first. And so you'd potentially have a lot of negative pricing. And that negative pricing would potentially be a disincentive for dispatchable resources. So
Could you not dispatch it? We throttle renewable energy all the time.
you would
You could control that, couldn't you?
you could definitely control it. But
Just like we were talking about controlling, we need more government in order to make sure people aren't withholding. So more government would be part of that solution. We need better control on the ERCOT. And what I'm really getting at, and I appreciate that we would have the wrong market signals. Things would be kind of messed up. But inherently, the instability of the grid is not the presence or absence of intermittent versus dispatchable energy. It's the reliance upon that electron that we don't know is going to be there. So would you agree with that statement?
that's the uncertainty of the resource is a challenge, yes.
And that's where I think all of us agree. If we rely on something we don't know is going to be there, the grid is less stable. Merely having available excess energy that we don't know is going to be there is not the problem. It's when we don't have enough dispatchable. So it's not the ratio of intermittent to dispatchable. It's the sufficiency of the dispatchable. That's the problem we should be solving for, isn't it?
Do you mean the insufficiency of the non-dispatchable?
I mean insufficiency of dispatchable. That's when we get in trouble, right? If we don't have enough electrons available when we need them. Correct. Having guessing work out there that's the problem we're solving for. And what I'm getting at is if we pick a number and it's not tied to net peak load or something else actual, and we're just messing with the private sector that wants to make decisions to bring more renewable energy, we're not really solving for the right problem. I wanted this to be clearer. Can you help me?
I think you're trying to say is what is the source of the problem we're dealing with, and if we knew when the wind would blow, that would make things a lot easier.
Sure.
The dispatchable resources, whether it's natural gas, whether it's batteries, or even controllable load resources,
Right.
Those resources help to balance and offset that uncertainty that we see.
And it's perfectly legitimate to value a dispatchable electron differently and at a higher value than we do for a less reliable electron. We all agree on that.
we agree that programs like the Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service is designed for that particular purpose, yes.
And I think we generally agree that federal subsidies have created an imbalance in the ratio of renewable energy to traditional dispatchable, which meant gas-fired or coal-fired energy. But we've also benefited from those subsidies. Every industry in Texas has had a boom as a result of the CREZ project and the renewable energy resources that it served. And now we have, in my view, and I have great respect for Senator King and the work he does on this, but I think we disagree that we're going to have kind of a heavy-handed, prescriptive, a recipe for what the market should build, and thereby cutting off the investment and innovation that the private sector can bring to this market. I guess that wasn't a question.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else wishing to ask PUC or ERCOT any questions regarding anything? All right. Y'all stick around. We have some public testimony. Mark Stover, Adrian Shelley, Walt Baum, Cyrus Reed. Mr. Stover, welcome.
Morning.
Your batteries like this and your wind not, or where are you on this?
We will talk about that in the 2 minutes I have.
All right.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Mark Stover. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Solar and Storage Association. Today, I am here to respectfully oppose SB 388 as written. Solar power is a predictable source of affordable generation. Energy storage is the most flexible, dispatchable technology on the grid. On a standalone and co-located basis, solar and storage are increasing reliability, lowering power prices for consumers, and creating economic benefits for Texans. While we share your interest in maintaining grid reliability, Vice Chairman King, we believe 388 is not the right approach. As this committee knows and was just discussed, several market design changes have been made since Winter Storm Uri, and they are showing results. Right now, certainty is needed in the market. That is what attracts new generation investment. We believe 388 would have a destabilizing effect on the market. And while the bill may seem straightforward, we believe it could produce unintended consequences that could actually increase costs on consumers and undermine reliability. By placing a mandate on private generation, the bill could cause generators to delay or avoid investments. I'll just skip right to the end here since time's tight. If policymakers decide we need more market design changes, we encourage you to pursue a more holistic and market-driven approach.
Great. Do you represent batteries at standalone battery farms?
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead. Do those people like this bill? I'm playing with you.
Depends on the committee setup.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Adrian Shelley with Public Citizen. Appreciate the opportunity to testify. I am here against the bill. I want to start out on a positive note. I appreciate the attention to the natural gas requirement and the shift toward dispatchability. I think we should look a little bit broader and say, not dispatchable generation, but dispatchable resources. As we heard earlier, there are other options, controllable load resources, aggregated demand response. Those serve the same function in dispatchability. But ultimately, we don't think that the 50% requirement makes a lot of sense. Again, the focus oughtn't be on, pitting one source against another, but determining what is the amount of the dispatchable resource that we want and setting targets or incentives or whatever to get to that level. So what we would recommend is maybe a study that determines the amount, a megawatt figure for dispatchability, figure out what that desirable number is, and then find a way to get there. We do have that concern that creating credits and forcing particular sources of generation to purchase those will have the effect of increasing costs for everybody, which ultimately gets passed on to consumers. The final point I will make is if we do want to do something like this, it may make sense to focus on procurement on the load side of things. Many loads have diverse portfolios. They're in a good position to adjust their procurement, so there may be an opportunity on that side. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Baum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, my name is Walt Baum, and I represent Powering Texans. We're testifying today neutrally on Senate Bill 388. So far this session, we've seen the grid responding well to record peak demand. The work that the legislature has done the past few sessions on weatherization, coordination of gas and electricity is working to ensure a reliable grid that encourages businesses to move to Texas and stay in Texas. As I've testified in front of this committee before, we think the market needs certainty. The legislature has passed a lot of relating to market structure, and we think the commission does have the tools they need, but need time to continue implementing past legislation like the Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service and things that were in Senate Bill 1500. But, we do appreciate the intent of the bill, and, we have some concerns about the bill as filed, which is why we're on it. As like the discussion that you were having earlier with Senator Colkhorst, since most of the new generation in the interconnection queue right now is solar and batteries, we do worry that as drafted, it could result in, the dispatchable generation credit payments going from solar developers to battery developers. To enable the bill to be more beneficial for reliability, we would recommend that both new and existing dispatchable thermal generation be eligible to provide the credits, and that the capacity value of batteries reflect the reliability value of their duration limits, the point that you were discussing earlier. We've identified a few areas where we think the bill can be simplified but still support the bill's intent. And thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Reed.
Thank you. For the record, Cyrus Reed, Lone Star Chapter of the Sierra Club, against SB 388. Wanted to talk about this weekend. This weekend on Saturday, solar hit a new record. Over 50% of the generation at one time was from solar. Sunday, about 75% at one time was from renewable energy, and we had very low prices and no problems in reliability. So our issue with the bill is, first, we were supporters of the PUC sunset bill that included the DRRS, included co-optimization, included reliability standard, included firming. Let's let those things work first. And then my second point is going to be a disagreement with how we did renewable energy credits. We didn't set a percentage goal. We set a megawatt goal for renewables, and then we didn't put it on power generators. We put it on loads. So in our view, if we want to do a bill like this, let's set a megawatt goal for dispatchable resources and create a trading program and have loads. So that would be retail electric providers, co-ops, and munis. That would be a better way to do it than pitting power generators one against the other and forcing them to buy those credits, which ultimately would just make it more expensive for consumers. So we're against the bill. But if it goes forward, we would suggest setting a megawatt goal and having it on loads. And also to that point, dispatchable could include batteries, load resources, and traditional fossil fuel generators. All of those things can basically provide dispatchability. So that is what I would suggest, and happy to provide a red line if needed. If you agree with that approach, I don't want to waste anyone's time, but that is what we would do. In that event. Thank you very much.
Senator Johnson.
Only to say that what Mr. Reed just said, I think that makes a lot of sense along the lines of what I was saying before. If the real problem is having sufficient dispatchable generation, let's figure out what that number is, and not mess with the rest of the market.
Exactly, and the renewable portfolio standard was an amazing success because we set a megawatt goal and we set a target. And then we met it so easily we got rid of it, and we supported getting rid of it and just having a voluntary trading program because we'd already met the goal. And I think similarly, that would be a way to focus on dispatchability.
And for the record, you and I did not discuss this bill before this hearing, is that correct?
We did not.
Okay, just so anybody.
Thank y'all. Y'all are dismissed. Last three, Thomas Darte, Werner Roth, who's with the PUC, and Larry Lindenschmidt. Anyone else wish to testify, please come forward. Darte? Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I
I represent myself and the public, although they probably don't know it. I support this bill or any bill that gets dispatchable generation built for reliability. I like Senator Johnson's discussion there. There are three things that are needed in this bill, and I'm look at it a little bit broader than what you're looking at it, Mr. Senator King. We need three things to get dispatchable generation built. We need to find how much generation is needed, who will pay for it, and how will they get paid. If you have those three elements, you will get plants built. How much is needed? We already know the answer. The E3 study, as part of PCM, determined that 9,000 megawatts of dispatchable generation is needed right now. They amended that to 12,000 megawatts. So I would put into this bill how much you actually want to achieve. Put a number in there, and let's get going on it. Okay, also I'd have ERCOT update that amount based on the reliability standard on an ongoing basis. Who will pay? The load-serving entities, retail electric providers, munis, and co-ops. It's called the LSC reliability obligation. They're the ones that need to pay for it. And how will they pay for it? They should pay for it with bilateral contracts and power and energy contracts, which are already commonly in use. So in effect, what we do, if we have these things in place, we create a competitive wholesale market that feeds into the retail electric market.
You can finish your thought there.
Excuse me?
You want to wrap it up? Or are you done?
Well, I'm saying this is all about competition and getting dispatchable generation built. Let's get it built.
Thank you, sir.
Put a number in there.
Appreciate you being here. Mr. Lennon-Schmidt?
Chairman Schwartner, Vice Chairman King, distinguished members, I'm Larry Lennon-Schmidt, speaking as an individual. I'm Executive Director of the Hill Country Institute and a volunteer with the Citizens Climate Lobby, along with over 11,000 other Texans. Thank you for this opportunity. Texas is known as the epicenter of free enterprise, the home of the Texas economic miracle, which led to ERCOT. If we believe in the free market, why set limits or goals for any type of generation? Let the free market be the free market. If you really believe in free enterprise, remove Section 39.9044 of the Utilities Code. Even with the subsidies of the Texas Energy Fund, the federal tax code, and various other subsidies from the state of Texas, natural gas plants are not being built in adequate numbers to meet the growing needs of Texas electricity. Texas needs reliability and affordability. Dispatchability is not the same as reliability when a plant is not functional. The reality is that dispatchability on its own is an insufficient and potentially misleading criterion for evaluating new resource additions. In fact, so-called dispatchable resources can and have failed to dispatch. A disproportionate focus on the dispatchability of specific generation resources risks steering discussions away from what really matters, achieving and maintaining a reliable and affordable power system. While dispatchability refers to an operator's ability to control a resource's output, the reliability of a resource reflects its ability to generate electricity and support the grid during normal operating conditions and periods of grid risk, such as during an extreme storm or a period of peak demand. During such high-risk periods, dispatchable resources may not be available due to issues like mechanical failures or insufficient fuel supply. Ultimately, what matters most for customers isn't dispatchability or even resource-level reliability, but rather system reliability. The grid's ability to meet consumer demand during normal operating conditions and periods of grid risk. Critically, system reliability can be supported by both dispatchable and intermittent resources, along with the underlying transmission network. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions of these two individuals?
May I?
Senator King?
Thank you. Mr. Dart, thank you for being here. If I remember right, you're a former ERCOT board member?
Yes, and I spoke to this issue 20 years ago, trying to get a mechanism in the energy-only market that would incentivize dispatchable generation. The thought was that competition would take care of it. I think we can all agree that the scarcity pricing model is not getting the plants built. We need a direct mechanism that rewards these plants enough money to get them built, but just enough money to get them built, and get just the amount of generation built that needs to be built. That's good for the consumer. It's good for reliability. It preserves the competitive market. And what I'm proposing here would actually enhance the wholesale market. And so I hope, and it's fairly simple to implement. You don't need any complicated PCM. You don't need any capacity. There's no capacity number specified in here that everybody hates. It's all about wholesale competition and retail competition and setting a specific goal. You've all seen the latest ERCOT projections for load. We're already behind.
Which I thought was interesting when you said the E3 report said we needed 9,000 megawatts
Right now.
of new dispatchable, and that was 2 years ago, and that was before the advent of the data center AI situation, which
Right.
has added gigawatts and gigawatts of demand.
Yes, and also,
For
by the way,
dispatchable.
they updated that number subsequently to 12,000 megawatts, and I believe it had to do with all the massive renewables coming in. By the way, with this system, once you meet your, if each LSC meets its reliability obligation first with the amount of dispatchable generation, then they're free to put in as much solar as they want and let the economics and the competitiveness. I don't think you need to limit renewables at all. It will take the economics of it will take care of itself. So, but let's focus on getting the reliability and the dispatchable first. Everything else will flow through it with competition.
Thank you. And I always think it's interesting too that just from an environmental standpoint, that you have to have 2,000 acres of solar panels to get the same amount of electricity you're going to produce with 50 acres at a gas-fired plant. And so there's that side of this too for why you want more dispatchable, whether it's coal or whether it's gas, or whether you're going to have any more coal, whether it's gas or nuclear.
Well, just make it clear, I'm not anti solar at all. I think it's good, but we have to have reliability and we have to have dispatchable.
Yeah, I'm not
It's the
at
only way
all.
to get there.
And I agree. If there had never been federal subsidies, we would have seen the development of renewables at a free market way, and it would have been very stabilizing and cost effective for the market. But because it was subsidized, it came in too fast and too heavy, and it skewed the free market. And now we're short on dispatchable.
If I could just say one more thing. NRG did a study in 2021 talking about the LSC reliability obligation. So I know that something like this was implemented, they would build because they've said so. There's no need for capacity charges. The wholesale competition in combination with the retail combination will lower rates. Plants will get built, reliability is protected, and we won't need that scarcity pricing anymore.
Well, thanks for always staying up with this, and thanks for being.
Yep. Thank y'all
you very
both.
much.
Appreciate it. Members, no one else is. Senator Middleton, do you have a question?
I actually
Yep.
I was going to thank Senator King for this bill. Sorry I missed a lot of the layout and the questions, but badly needed. This is something that was a top priority last session that we passed. I'm glad you brought up the dispatchability issue, where there's I believe it's either ERCOT or PUC report from December the 1st, and they're counting wind and solar that has 10% or more of installed capacity in battery is dispatchable, and I'm sorry, but that's not dispatchable. You think about that, a day that the sun's not shining, it should be at 50-55% capacity runtime for solar. Well, if you're at 10%, that's not dispatchable. And then also, if the batteries are discharging at 100% of capacity, they get a couple hours, and that's not either. So I'm glad you're working on that, and I appreciate your efforts to make sure that we have power all the time, not just some of the time, right? That's the goal here. So thank you for your hard work on this.
Thank you, sir. Well, we have a lot of